Hello, welcome listeners to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love hosted by Richard Osler. Our guest on today's podcast, joining me from Florida, a longtime friend, Scott Mena. Welcome to the podcast, Scott.
Hello, hello everybody. Welcome.
I've known Scott for a long time, and just a little bio before we get Scott talking. He's in his mid-30s. He lives in Deltona, Florida. That is the name of the city. He's active in the church. He's recently been a ward mission leader. He has a different calling now, and he's very active in supporting LGBTQ Latter-day Saints. He's gay. He's going to share that story, but he's also involved in lots of community pride events. So he's
Yeah.
part of both of these worlds because he is both of these worlds. He's Latter-day Saint, he's gay, and he's supporting both sides of that part of who he is in a very creative, unique, thoughtful way. He's just going to share his story, 45 minutes to 60 minutes. I've read his outline. It is powerful and it is unique. And he has been walking a really unique road for a long time with grace and courage and really difficult chapters, and is in a place now where, and I think he's been this way for a while, that he could share his story. And our prayer is this will help you if you're a queer Latter-day Saint and maybe new to realizing this is who you are, or parents or local leaders just wanting to support brave, wonderful people like Scott. Scott is, if you're watching on video, has this awesome rainbow bow tie. Ever since I've known Scott and seen pictures of him, this is who he is. He's a theater guy. He's very creative, very unique, very gifted, multi-ethnic, multicultural, sort of belongs everywhere because of his unique Christ-like attributes and gifts. So, and he's embracing all of that. Isn't that awesome? So with that, I'll turn it to you, Scott, to share your story.
All right. All right, listeners, brace yourself. Um, so yes, my name is Scott Mena. So let's see. Let's start off with where everything kind of started. I have to thank my parents, my mom and dad. My mom's from Peru, and my dad's from El Salvador. They are converts to the church. They met at a single adult event, and actually, I think it was a dance. And then I popped up in the picture. And I was born in Sleepy Hollow, New York, and I have two younger sisters. I got my sister Denise, who's a year and a half younger than me, and then my sister Kimberly, who's 10 years younger than me. And so in the household, like we spoke Spanish and English, and we got to have like a really great childhood there in New York, and we moved around in different spots. And it wasn't until I moved to Cortland Manor in New York that I started noticing there was just something different about me. And it all happened when I remember walking down a hall and I saw this kid who was probably 2 years older than me. And I just felt butterflies. It was so weird. I was like, oh, why am I feeling these butterflies? And there was just something that was drawing me to him. And I was about 6 years old at the time. And so I was like, okay, this is just strange, but okay. And there was just a wanting of getting to know him. And so at that time, a lot of kids were like, oh, we have crush on this girl, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. But it was like not dawning on me that that would be something later on. And so we moved to Middletown, New York. And when I was in fifth grade, that's when I realized that something was happening. And I had this huge crush on one of the popular guys in our school. And I was like, huh, this is weird. It wasn't until a girl said, "Why are you gay? Why do you act so gay?" That I was like, "Wait a minute. What does that mean?" And I was like asking her, and she's like, "Oh, that's when a boy likes a boy." And I'm like, I found a vocabulary, like I found the word that I was wondering what it was. And so at that time, I was like, all right, so I have something. But it was weird because at that time, when I started relating the word, the biggest thing that popped up was AIDS. And so this was during, of course, during the 90s. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, well, that's not a good, alignment to being gay. Like, I guess people die from that. I didn't know much, but I just knew that AIDS was a bad thing and you could get it and you could die. And then I remember like we got for the strength of the youth. And during the Strength of the Youth during the 90s, I remember like in the pamphlet it said like specifically it says the Lord specifically forbids sex perversion such as homosexuality. And that's when I found out that gay is homosexuality. And then it continues saying in the pamphlet, homosexual and lesbian activities are sinful and an abomination to the Lord, and unnatural affections towards persons of the same gender are counter to God's eternal plan. And so once I started understanding that, I was like, oh, there's something wrong with me. And so I kept on saying to myself, like, okay, I'm going to ignore this. And I went into like doing like films and stuff like that. Because I was such a I love movies. I was a huge like Batman fan back the 1989 version of Batman that Tim Burton did, and I was obsessed with that. And after that, I was just like, I love movies so much. So my aunt gave me a camera and I started to use it, and that's when I fell in love with like filming, and I did like my little, I guess it would turn out to be like a really long movie, but it was like called The Forbidden, and I did it with my family, use my family in it. But it like doing that project like helped me kind of turn off my feelings and what was going on inside of me at the time. Um, and it was during this time too that I decided to tell my sister, Denise, the middle child in the family. And so when I told her, I was like, Denise, I don't know how to tell you this, but I I like boys. And she's like, what? And I was like, yeah, I do. I don't know. I like them. And so she was like, like them, like them, like, yeah. And so then she was telling me like, well, like, how do you know? And I'm like, I really like Howie from the Backstreet Boys. Like, and she's like, oh my gosh. And she's like, Katie, we're laughing like kids. And but then I told her like, don't tell anybody. And then the next day, I go up to my mom and I was like, Mom, what's happened? But she called me and she had a tone, and I was like, oh, I hope my sister didn't do what I hope she didn't do. And my mom spoke to me and said, like, Scott, Denise told me something that kind of concerns me, but she said something that you like boys. And I was like, oh my gosh, ew, no, like totally denying it. I was like, I don't know what she's talking about. She must have watched something on MTV and it made her think that, or I don't know what. But I was like in such denial and I was so scared because of what I read in the for the Strength of the Youth pamphlet. And also what I was seeing with everything relating to gay and what the girls said about being gay, and I was just so scared. And so, and also my parents were not doing well marriage wise, that I even thought like this might affect their marriage. So I was like, no, I'm not going to say anything. And I lost trust in anyone with the situation I was going through. So in 2000, my family moved to my grandmother's house here in Deltona, Florida. And it took a while for me to adjust. But the best thing that really helped me out, that allowed me to be creative and helped me to feel more focused, was our middle school class of TV productions that my teacher, Val Bungart, taught. And it helped me to make friends. I made one of my best friends I still have today, Lauren Blake. And we got to do so many projects that helped me to be creative and helped me to do my next film. And then I got to do a summer program of theater for the first time. Like I always wanted to do theater, but for some reason in New York, the budgets were being cut from so many schools, and so I never got to do it. And then I just found the opportunity for the summer, and I fell in love with theater. I fell in love with like doing productions and stuff like that. It led me to get to know my high school drama teacher, Sally Dakin, and I got to do so many. Like after that, I was lucky because freshman year I got to join in, do competitions for districts and states, and really like join a lot of community theater as well. It helped me a lot because as I was trying to hide, I realized that when I connected myself to other characters, I felt like I was not myself. And it was very psychological in a way, but I I wasn't really happy with myself, and I wish I was, but it was just a part of me that was like, yeah, I got to play somebody else, and it's not me. And I also got to do like my film Rest in Peace that actually just helped me to channel some of the stuff that I was going through. But around this time too, pornography kind of popped into my life. And I watched like inappropriate scenes in films, and that like I started to veer towards that because I just felt like this was something I could keep to myself. And it also introduced me to queer cinema, which was interesting because for the first time, I always saw, you know, heterosexual couples together, but I'd never seen two men together. And so, but there was some scenes that are, I mean, there was like movies that didn't show anything, but I got to see the whole storyline and I was like, wow, I've never seen this. And I got to learn more about what it was to be a gay man. Just a little snippet and through a storyline. And so that helped me out a lot and just seeing that there was different sides to people and that the LGBTQ plus community had stories that weren't all pornographic, unfortunately, you know. And then President Gordon B. Hinckley around this time like challenged the youth to read the Book of Mormon. And I was like, you know, I don't even know if this is true, because even when I was baptized 8 years or 9 years old, I even like questioned the church even back then. And my parents were like, Scott, you got to get baptized. And I was like, nah, I don't know. Let me see. And so they introduced the missionaries to me. I actually was a convert baptism because I was 9 years old. I didn't do what everyone else did at 8 years old. So it was good for me to kind of go and really search for this, you know, the truth of the gospel. And so when I did that challenge for the Book of Mormon, during high school, um, I really did gain a testimony because I was like, wow, you know what? After reading it, something told me like, you already know the answer, Scott. Like, and so I was like, it's true. Like the stories and everything, like I feel like that, like it's true. And by this point, the strength of the youth changed too with the wording. It said like homosexual activity is a serious sin. If you find yourself struggling with same gender attraction, seek counsel from your parents and bishop. They will help you. And for some reason, when I read that, that made me even more scared about coming out. And so I kept thinking, this is a phase, it's going to go away. I don't know how, but it's going to happen. Um, and then as I got closer to senior year of high school, I was getting more worried about the possibility of going on a mission. And so junior year was the year that I started getting eczema on my hands. Like I got like blisters that were really big on my hand. And when we went to the doctor, uh, they told me that it was caused by stress. And I was like, oh, well, I'm doing theater and all this and that, and I'm doing Boy Scouts and everything. I don't understand why, you know, this is happening. But inside I knew that it had to do with me staying in the closet and dealing with all those emotions that I couldn't talk to anybody because I just lost trust. Um, and so we got closer to, yeah, senior year came by, and I remember like during that year it was very tough for me. I lost a friend. The 2024 hurricanes happened and they hit us pretty hard. And so there's just a lot of things going on internally with that. I was trying to make like a short film of mine, and then I knew that the mission was coming and I was just stressing out. And during that period, I remember just praying, like, please, Heavenly Father, please help me to be straight. Like, if you could part the waters for Moses, if you could, you know, help these prophets do amazing things, you can do something simple and just turn me straight like that, please. I mean, there's a possibility of something, but it never happened. And it made me more and more depressed. I was like, you know what? I guess this is what God wants me to deal with. And I remember one time, like even going into the closet here and praying so hard and crying. And then my mom came in the room and she's like, what are you doing in there? So I was like, oh, I'm just praying, you know, something. She's like, okay. And that's just how much I wanted to change. And then finally, I remember one prayer I prayed and I was like, Lord, I'm just leading up to you. I don't know what else to do. I got up from my bed and immediately I felt like a voice telling me, Scott, you need to talk to your bishop and your mother. And in my head, I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Oh my gosh, I'm going crazy. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's this? I've never had anything like that happen to me. And I was like, nope, nope, I'm going crazy. I need to talk to somebody. But then this this feeling, this voice just kept prompting me to do that. And I was like telling myself, okay, I'm not feeling anything bad about this. Like I'm just worried. So maybe this is the Lord telling me, you know, to do this. And so I was like, all right, all right. If this is meant to happen, it's meant to happen. So I remember going to, my call the bishop. He did not pick up. So I was like, all right, I guess next up is mom. So I went to mom. She was watching TV. I was like, hey mom, I need to talk to you. And so I had her come to my room and we sat down and I just remember sitting there for what probably felt like an hour, but it was probably more like 5 minutes. But my mom was like, are you okay? And I was like, I need to tell you something. She's like, do you need help? And I was like, sure, okay. And she was like, well, are you dealing with something with drugs? And I was like, no, and just all the way went all the way down to, are you gay? And I was like, yeah, mom, I'm gay. And she's like, how do you know? And I was like, well, I just I don't like girls. I've tried. And I told her like, I always tried to want to date like my friends and stuff like that, but it just felt like I was dating my sisters and I just felt this attraction to boys and so my mom was like, "All right, did you talk to the bishop?" And I was like, "No, I tried calling him." She's like, "All right, well, you know what? Hopefully I'll call you back. And I just want to let you know I still love you and I'm here for you." And it was something like I needed to hear. I was like, "Thank you, mom." And so she, left the room and I was just like, wow, Lord, that was easier than I thought. Thank you so much. And then after a few minutes, I heard sobbing like when someone dies sobbing, like it was one of those situations. And I was like, and I knew it was me. And I was so scared because grandma was in the next room and I was like, she's gonna hear that, she's gonna wonder what's happening. It's mom. So I was like, finally I was like, okay, I'm gonna go over there and let me just act like I don't know what's happening, be like, "Mom, what's happening? Oh." And when I got to my grandpa's room, because she was in there, I saw my grandma trying to calm her down, and she was like, she looked at my mom, looks at me, and she's like, "I'm so sorry, Scott. I told your grandma everything," and she just walked out, and I'm like, and I was just in the state of panic because my grandma never was a member of the church, but she was straight up Catholic. I was expecting if the day ever came that I came out to her that she would grab holy water and throw it at me and, steam would come out of me and she's like, get up, Satan, whatever, something crazy like that. But instead, my grandma said in Spanish, she was like, hijito son, my grandson, everything's going to be okay. And I'm not going to tell your uncles anything because grandma was the biggest gossiper in the family, but she ended up not saying anything. And she was like, I'm not going to tell anything about this. It's between us and I'm here to help you. And that was so comforting to hear from my grandma. And then my mom came into the room and she was like, your phone was ringing and it was the bishop. I picked up and I told him that you're here and here you go. And I was like, ah, the Lord was throwing everything at me that day. And so that like I was like, "Hey Bishop, how you doing?" And so they were like, "Oh, Bishop, well, you know what? Can I talk to you, for tomorrow or something like that?" And he was like, "Yeah, yeah, we can talk. Is everything okay?" Mom was crying. I was like, "Oh, it's okay. We'll talk about it tomorrow." And so I ended up the next day telling my bishop, um, and I have to thank my bishop, Jeffrey Miller, because I've heard so many stories of other people, other bishops, like just going straight into like judging, the LGBTQIA plus community, but he listened to me. He listened to me. And the funny thing was, like, I had just done a show, Clue the Musical. I played Mrs. White. And he was telling me, oh, before you start talking, I just want to say thank you so much for that amazing performance. And you played such a great woman and everything. I'm like, about that. I'm just gonna segue right into what we're talking about. And so I told him everything. He listened to me. I even did include the pornography part, which I didn't tell to my mom. So in some ways, I was like, "Hey, mom, deleted scene. You didn't hear this part, so now you know." But it was good to have both of them there and listen to the struggle I was going through with both parts, my identity, but also the pornography, because it really was for me like all I was relying on. And so at the end of listening to music, thank you for sharing that with me, Scott. Um, I'm I'm gonna hold off on your mission papers because at this point I did end up doing everything except my medical exams and everything for the mission papers. And he told me, you know what? We're not gonna send your papers in right now. I think we need to focus on you. So let's just work on that. And he got me to do therapy with the family services. And then he also told me to go to addiction recovery meetings. And I was worried about both things. I was like, oh my gosh, is this like the conversion therapy stuff? And he was like, no, no, I mean, no, this is just you talking to a therapist. I'm like, oh, okay. And it was sad because during that time, I was even thinking about conversion therapy and like, maybe I should jump into that. I mean, I hear that supposedly helps people, turn straight. Maybe that's, but my family was like, we don't have money for that because it was expensive. And thank God, thank you, Heavenly Father, that it was. Um, because I did not go through with any conversion therapy. But the therapy did help. I went through 2 therapists, during the time, and it helped me out so much. And the addiction recovery meetings also helped too. At first I felt uncomfortable. I was like, I don't relate to any of these people. But the more I stayed at those meetings, the more I was like, wow, yep, I needed this. And both of those things helped me to journal. It helped me to express all that I was feeling. It helped me to find ways of using the 12 step program to be able to connect more with our Heavenly Father with what I was going through. Um, and because of all of this, it led me to wanting to tell my dad because I was like, Dad's going to start questioning why I'm going to these therapy sessions. I was meeting with the bishop almost every Sunday after church. And so, and that was a great thing for me because Bishop in some way wanted me to be held accountable for like my actions, what I was doing. He was like trying to help me out, like, especially with the pornography act, the situation I was going through. But I was like, I got told dad. So when I told dad, dad did not have the same response as my mom. I was expecting it to be the same, but instead he was like, I had a feeling you were. And I was like, what? Well, mom didn't think that. Okay. And even mom didn't even like when I brought up about, don't you remember when Denise told you? And she didn't even remember that because she said she trusted me so much. And so my dad was just like, yeah, like I had a feeling you were. I was like, oh, okay. He was like, people in the church asked me if you were, and I just said I don't know. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to know which member said that, but okay. And then my dad said, Scott, this is a fate you're going through. And I know that the Lord will help you if you do everything you're supposed to. You're you will get to that path of being straight and marrying a girl and all that. I'm like, yeah, yeah. And at the time I believed him. I was like, yeah, my dad knows what he's talking about. Yeah. But it did affect me a bit, later down the road. But I was glad I told him. I told my sister Denise, and she showed support for me. And she didn't even remember when she told my mom. I was like, I know this happened. Like I know it wasn't a figment of my imagination. And so and so she was very supportive and she was like, hey, I'm here for you. I love you. And so it was just nice to have the support of my mom, my sister, and my dad being there, even though he didn't quite understand everything. I didn't even go to college or school because I was so focused on trying to get um on my mission, through all of this. But my bishop did say, go try to find work, try to do that, and try to, save up money for the mission when it happens. So I worked at Kohl's and I didn't like it, but I stayed there and then I got laid off because it was seasonal. But then thankfully I got to go to, I started working at the movie theater for Regal Entertainment Group and I loved it. And being a movie holic, perfect job for me and I had friends from high school and I made new friends. And then during his time, I met a friend. His name is Mickeal, and he was someone that as I remember seeing him come up to the box office because I was an usher and then moved to the box office, and he always popped up there and he would always talk to me, and I just like, I got like not bubbles, but I got butterflies, and I was always excited to see him and talk to him. And I remember one day he came up to me, after we've, talked a lot and for several months, and he was like, Scott, I want to ask you something. Are you gay? And immediately I freaked out. There was a customer that was waiting behind him, and I was like, wait, let me talk to this customer. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do I tell him? Oh my gosh, well, of course, no. And so then I finished with the customer. He walked up, from up to me, and he was like, well, Scott, are you gay? And I was like, no, no, I'm not gay. I'm sorry. I talk with my hands a lot. I'm very theatrical. I mean, no, no, I'm not. And he's like, oh, the reason I asked was I actually wanted to ask you out, but I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to, you know, think that you were. I shouldn't presume that. I was like, oh no, it's okay. Inside, I was screaming. I was like, gosh, I wish I could say yes. And he seems like a great guy and everything, but I was just like, no. And I even brought it up to my therapist. And that was at this time it was my second therapist, and she told me like, Scott, if you want to date this guy, there might be difficulty starting a mission. Like you have your goal for your mission, try to focus on that. And so I did. I decided I'm like, you know what? I can't date him. But I hung out with him and I still stayed in the closet. And there were moments where, we went out to McDonald's and even during my breaks from the movie theater. And I was like, is this how dating feels like? Wow. And I was just so happy to be around him. And then one day, though, I didn't speak to him for a while. He didn't show up. And then I saw him come up to buy a ticket and he was having his arm around a girl. And I was like, oh, hey, is this your friend? He's like, oh, yeah, we're on a date. And I was like, oh, okay, which movie, And I got his ticket and he left. And that broke my heart because I was like, gosh, this happened. I'm like, I guess he's bi. I'm like, I'm confused. And I was just like, it just kind of broke my heart. And I remember then a cop stopped me. There was a lot going on that day. And then I stopped somewhere and I just bawled my eyes out. But it wasn't because of the car situation. It was because of Mickeal. And I was just like, why does this have to happen to me? Like, why couldn't I be with him? And it really affected me. But finally I was like, I'm just gonna move forward. I'm gonna move forward and just focus on my mission. Um, and then it was during this time, like I actually was like pretty much ready to go. My therapist, she just told me like, "Hey Scott, do you still want to go on a mission?" I was like, "Absolutely. This is why I'm still going on these sessions with you." And she was like, "Okay, well, you can go on a mission." And I'm like, "What? Really?" And she's like, "Yeah, you are ready. I've been, you've been doing great. Addiction recovery meetings. You know, you haven't relapsed in a long time with your pornography. You're doing great. And I think you're ready." And I was like, oh my gosh. And I just felt like this overwhelming feeling of joy after working for 5 years trying to go on a mission. And then I remember her asking me, like, I want to ask, like, what do you plan to do after your mission? And I said, what's interesting? I feel like I need to help people that have gone through the same thing that I've been going through. I just don't know when that's gonna happen or how, but I just know it's something that I feel like I need to do. She's like, I hope I'm there when that happens. I really do. So if she hears this, I hope she hears this, but I hope she knows it's happening. So um and then I remember seeing Mickeal, when I was getting ready to like leave the my job there and get ready for my mission, and he was like, "Hey, I can't talk to you right now." I'm like, "Oh, what happened?" "I just want to tell you, just come in the car. I want to tell you something really awesome." He's like, "No, I can't talk to you right now. I don't want to talk to anyone right now because I'm going through something." And it ended up, I found out later, was that he got arrested for drug possession, and he was going through a lot at the time. And I didn't see him after that. And I was just like always wondering, like, what happened with Mickeal? So I waited for my mission call and it took a while. And there was a point where I thought after like, I think it was over a month. And I was like, you know what? I think probably the, apostles must have seen my paperwork or whatever. And they were like, oh, he's gay. We can't have him serve. And I was starting to overthink things so much that I unfortunately relapsed. And I was just like, oh, and I felt even worse. I was like, oh, I'm a failure. I can't do this. And then I got a call from the state presidency telling me, hey, your mission call's coming. And I'm like, what? Really? Oh. And I should have been so overwhelmed with joy, but instead I felt guilty because I'm like, you couldn't have held it just a little longer and have faith, and you relapsed. But I opened my letter in front of everyone. I was happy. And when I opened it, it said like, hey, you're serving over at the Colorado Denver North Mission in a Spanish speaking mission. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be using my Spanish. But I should have been more joyful, but I just felt bad for the relapse. And so I went to the MTC and I was carrying this guilt with me, and thankfully, during one of the, district meetings, one of the leadership was like, "If you have something you wanna share that you haven't, got to tell somebody, like, if it's a problem or something that anything that you have done, we can talk to you." And I did. I took the opportunity. I shared with them, like, "Hey, I saw pornography. Unfortunately, I relapsed. I've been working so hard." And they're like, "You know what? Focus on the mission. How are you feeling right now?" I was like, "I feel great." Now that I told somebody, they're like, "Just focus on the missionary work, and brother men, you're gonna do great. Or elder men, you're gonna do great." And I was like, "Yes." And that helped me to just clear up, go on my mission, go to my first area of Aurora and just learn so much. And it took a while for me to adjust. And I did keep my homosexuality, to myself because I was so afraid after working for 5 years that if somebody found out, it would jeopardize me, and I was afraid to go back home. Um, so I was like, "I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna try to stay as closet as possible and stay quiet." Of course, later I talked to my mission companions. They were like, "Well, we kinda had a feeling." But, you know, you do what you can. I guess in that aspect, I wasn't the best actor on that. But, um, but it was such a very I knew that when I was there, I realized I had to be there. The people I spoke to and even my missionary companions who were there, like, there was a lot of things that I used, the tools from even my, addiction recovery meetings to my therapy that I actually used with them, especially with communicating. When we had our, companionship inventory, I was like, "Well, no, tell me more about this." And we even with my one 2 of my companions, one of them wanted to go back home, and, my mission president was like, "I want you to be with them to help him to learn to love the mission." And so I listened to him, and I let him speak, what he was going through, and it helped us out a lot, and even with the work. And so then when I got to, one of the areas, it was really difficult, for me because I was really trying really hard to work hard. We didn't have a car. My companion was wanting to go home, and also, there was like the membership. Like I was trying to help the membership kind of use us for missionary work, and it wasn't really happening because there was just there's a lot of stuff going on, and it stressed me out so much. And one day, like one of the people that we helped out asked if we can fix their computer, and it was downstairs, and they were like, "Oh, can you come downstairs? Or well, could you go downstairs? One missionary here, one downstairs to help out." And so this is a note to missionaries, like, stay sight and sound when you can with your companion, because unfortunately, I went downstairs, and when I saw that the computer was available and the internet wasn't available, I was like, "Hmm." I went into something, a video that I already was very familiar with, and unfortunately, I had relapsed, and I felt terrible after that. And so I remember then I changed companionship, and I finally told my companion, like, "I think I'm going back home because I relapsed watching pornography, unfortunately." And so he was like, "No, Elder, I don't think you're going back home for that, but okay, let's, go and let's figure this out." And so, I had 2 mission presidents, President Ely, God rest his soul, he passed away last year. And then also President Toombs, who's awesome. I love President Toombs. I love both of them. President Toombs, he was the last, of the mission presidents, for my mission. And when I told him, he was so caring and open, and I was expecting him to be like, "Well, here's your plane tickets to go back home." And I was like, "No." But thankfully, that wasn't what happened. Instead, he was like, "You're not the only one that has this issue." And I'm like, "What? Really?" Which now I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I was so naive." But, it's a difficult thing that happens with missionaries when they serve the mission. But he was so loving. He was like, "You're almost done." And I was. I only had like um, a transfer and a half, or about like over 6 months or 6 weeks to be able to finish my mission. And so he was like, "Look forward, you can do this." And so I did. And on my last area, I had a companion that it ended up being that he was having suicidal tendencies. And I was so thankful that somehow President Toombs and also the Lord put me together with him to kind of help him out because I was like, number one, I knew you don't take that lightly. And number two, he needed to communicate with somebody. And so it was so strange to that I was like, "Hey, tell me what you're feeling." And what he was feeling was something really serious. I told him talk to the mission president about it. He did, and I was and ended up going to family services. And I was like, "This is so weird because I went through all of this myself." But I was like, and I told him, I never told him until later. But I told him like, when you talk to your therapist, tell them everything. Don't hold anything back. And so he ended up doing that and ended up that he had to go back home. And so it was strange that when I went back, I finished my mission. He was going back home. Another missionary of mine had to go back home, but he had like a knee injury that needed to get surgery. So I was like going back home with two other companions. It was so weird. But it was a really amazing experience to be able to serve those 2 years in Colorado. And I got to do so many things, so many learning experiences as well. Was I perfect? No, but I really did the best that I could and still stay in contact with so many of those people. So, coming back was a strange adjustment, but I was so thankful that when I came back, I, I got to be with my family. I actually went to a trip to El Salvador, with my mom, I mean, with my dad and my sister, Kimberly, my little sister. And that's when I decided to tell her that I was gay. And she kept saying like, "No, you're not. You're not gay." And I'm like, "Kimberly, I am gay." And she's like, "Well, no, you're not." I'm like, have you ever seen me date a girl, Kimberly?" And she's like, "No." And I was like, "Yeah." And then I was like, I've always done theater and I always made that as an excuse. And I was so busy with schoolwork and all that. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, Scott, you are gay." And I was like, "I know." So it was just so funny. Um, and she was the first person that I remember we were driving somewhere where my dad grew up and we were in the back of a truck and she was like, "Scott, like, would you rather date, Heath Ledger or Christian Bale from The Dark Knight?" And I'm like, "Oh." And I was like, "Definitely Christian Bale." And for the first time, I never really got to talk to someone, neither Denise or my mom, about like the types of guys that I liked and stuff like that. I always kept that inside. But Kimberly was the first person that was like able to be open and, share that. So that was really nice to have somebody like that. And then my friend Krista um, helped me to kind of motivate to go back into filming and acting. And so I did, and I started filming stuff again. And I also started doing like short films for students in colleges and stuff like that. And then luckily got into my agency with BMG Talent. And that was like great blessings that I was doing something that I loved and getting paid for them. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I love this." And I also, strangely, one day driving somewhere to go to my friend's baptism because I was going to baptize her, I saw Mickeal and I was like, "Oh my gosh, Mickeal." And we reconnected and I asked him about it when he asked me out. And he said that, "Oh no, I was just saying that to get attention." And in my head, I'm like, how does a straight guy say that and try to get attention? No. But I had a feeling he must have been bisexual, but he was still not coming to terms with it. But I left it at that. Still stayed friends with him, and I knew most of his girlfriends, and I gave him rides because he didn't have a car. And it was just so strange that I kept seeing that, and it just, for me, I know it wasn't helping me out, but I want to be around him, and to me, that was the way to do it. And around this time too, I went to Pulse in Orlando. My friend Lindsay was inviting me to go over, and she's like, "Hey, we got to go to check out Pulse." And I'm like, "I've heard of Pulse." Now, I went to another gay club, which was over in Orlando called Parliament House. And for those of us that have gone there, it's a crazy fun place. I actually went there before I went on my mission. My friends were like wanting to do something fun and they're like, "Let's go to a gay club." I'm like, "Oh no, I shouldn't do that. You're gonna have to protect me." But inside I was like, "Yeah, I want to go." So I went, it was fun, it was cool, it was like all blacklit because it was all Avatar themed. It was the time when the first Avatar movie came out. So all I knew was about that club. And so when I was like telling her, I'm like, "I've been to Parliament House," she's like, "Oh no, it's way cleaner than that." I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool, let's go." I went there and a friend of mine, actually a few friends of mine from high school were there. And one of them, Darren, just like, "Oh my gosh, Scott!" dramatically falls on the floor, and I was like, "Darren, get back up!" He's like, Scott gets back up. This tall guy is like, "I always knew you were gay. I knew it." And I'm like, "Oh no, I'm not. No, I don't know what you're talking about," and just disappeared into the crowd. And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And I saw so many other of my friends there, and I was just like, this is weird. I didn't know you were gay, and you were playing soccer, and you're a football player. What? Like, my brain was exploding. And I also got to see my first drag show. Strangely, Parliament House, I always missed all their shows, but I got to see my first drag show at Pulse, and it was amazing. I was like, how do these people perform like that? I was like, wow, little would I know that one day that would be me. But I love that experience. When I and so I went to live in New York when my little sister decided to go, and something was telling me, you got to go move to New York with my sister Denise. And so it was nice to be in that community where my sisters knew who I was and I could be open about my sexuality and who I was. And I was helping serve at the Olmsted ward, and I was a ward mission leader for, oh my gosh, like about 3 years there. And even afterwards, after I moved back to Florida, like I was still serving as a ward mission leader doing Zoom meetings, and it was crazy. But it was great, and I got to do my film, No Vuelvo, or I Will Not Return, and and it got a lot of recognition after that. But it was during this time too that when I got the news about Pulse, and I was like, "Wait a minute, oh my gosh!" And my sister was like, "Did you know this place, do you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do. I went there once," and it was heartbreaking to know where the locations of everything was happening because I had been there. So I was like, "All right, well, you know what? I I wish I could do something." I didn't know anyone that was there, but my friend B told me that they were doing a memorial over at the Villages by Stonewall, and so I was like, "I'm gonna go there," and I went there, and there were thousands of people there, um, paying their respects for the 49 angels that we lost, and it really made me want to do something for the community. I just didn't know how. Um, and so then during that time, I finished my film, and my mom was needing help with my grandma because at this point, my grandma started getting Alzheimer's. And so my mom was like, "Oh, I would love it if you could come here and help." And I was like, "You know what? Let's do a deal. Can you get me a new computer and I'll help you with grandma so that I can edit this movie?" And she's like, "Let's do it." Okay, come, Scott. So I went over there thinking I was going to be there for a few months, and I got to help out with my mom and with grandma. And also I reconnected with Mickeal. I was like, "Mickeal, how are you doing?" Ended up he was homeless, he was going through stuff, and unfortunately he also got back into drugs. And I was helping him as much as I could, but at the same time as I was trying to help him, me being with him was like I was continuing this relationship, this thing that would never really happen. I kept on hoping that he would ask me out again, but he didn't. And I also was like not helping him because I knew later on, I was like, I know that I must have been dropping him off at his drug deals, unfortunately. And it got to a point where I was like, I have finally had to cut it off with him. I was like, I can't help you anymore. And it was really hard for me to get to that point, but I had to do it. Um, then because of the film I did, No Vuelvo, it got accepted, or I actually won an award, at Premios Latino over in Spain. And so I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that. That's crazy." And so my mom and my grandma were like, "Scott, you should go." And I'm like, "I have no money." And they were like, "We know, but we can help you." And I was like, how?" And then my grandma's like, "We can do it." And my friend Krista again was like, "Scott, you have to go. It's so worth it. I went to Europe, and just don't lose your passport, but just like, keep your money and everything. You're going to be fine. It's a great experience. You should travel just besides Spain, go to other places." And I was like, okay. And my parents were, my mom and my grandma were supportive. Even my dad was like, "Yeah, I'll help you with anything else you need." But I was like, "All right, let's do it." And I went, and I got to see my uncle who lived in Spain, in Tarragona, and I had an amazing time, not only in Spain to be there for the film, but also I got to go to France. I also got to go to Amsterdam, and I got to see my friends, Tony and Sarah and their family in Amsterdam. It was amazing. And then to England. And that whole trip was amazing because I got to see how the LGBTQIA plus community was treated so differently and so open. And I got to even go to some clubs and I was like, this is so much fun. I love the music and everything. And just the acceptance of the community was beautiful. And I also saw a show called The Inheritance that honestly motivated me to want to do more for the community because it definitely spoke specifically on the AIDS epidemic that happened in the 90s and how this group of men, especially one of them, how it affected him. And the end of that first part, because it was in two parts, just left me like wanting to do something more, especially for those that were dealing with the HIV um, virus and everything that's been going on, that's still going on today. And when I went after like, and craziest trip. I wish I could tell more about it, but I somehow got back home, and because I lost my passport and I lost my flight, but thankfully everything worked out. My drama teacher actually ended up met when I lost my flight, and she was like, "Come here, I'm gonna take you," and she helped me stay at her daughter's place, and just the timing, the Lord knows, it's so interesting. And I got to see the second part of that play, and then finally I got to go back home. But going back home was hard because I went through a depression because I knew that I couldn't be myself being back there. I couldn't be queer or gay, or anything like that because I had to hide myself. And I got to a point where I was like, you're either going to be happy or you try to be happy, being out, and being gay, but then you have to leave the church. Or you're going to stay in the church, but you're going to be miserable staying in church because you can't be yourself. And so I felt like I was stuck in these two places and I just got so depressed and I started getting suicidal tendencies. And the thing that got me out of it was thinking how my family would react seeing me or finding me and my sisters knowing what would happen. And, all of that was really affecting me. And even a dear friend of mine, Rosie Bumpus, who, unfortunately passed away from having cystic fibrosis, and she was just like she was trying to breathe, and she ended up passing away at such a young age. And unfortunately, like, and we stayed in contact, and she was someone that wanted to live life as much as she wanted to, but unfortunately, because of her health condition and her lungs and not being able to breathe properly, and even having a surgery that ended up not working out, she couldn't continue on with that life. And I was like, there's someone that wanted life and I'm trying to take it away. Like, this doesn't make sense. Told my parents. My dad was like, "It's a phase, Scott. It's gonna go away." And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And my mom's like, "No, your dad says, Scott, I'm here for you. No matter how busy I am with your grandma, I will help you." And I was like, "Okay, thank you." And so that helped me out a lot. And I went to my bishop, and my bishop unfortunately didn't know how to react with everything because I told him like about being gay and everything, but he was like, "I feel like you should go back to addiction recovery meetings. I know you're not with the pornography issue right now, but go back to that." And it helped me to have a sense of community, especially when my grandma passed away, that I was able to talk to somebody and talk to this group. And also when grandma passed away, um, my mom and I, because we were caretaking my grandma like every day, that it was just weird that we were left with like, what do we do now? And so we just kind of helped each other out. We were going to YMCA, doing water aerobics, and that helped me out a lot mentally too. But one day my mom told me like, Scott, I know that whatever you're going through, the Lord's gonna wipe it away and you're gonna be okay. And for some reason that made me feel bad because she was like, it made me feel like she was telling me like, oh, LG, your gay side will disappear. Like who you are is gonna disappear. You're gonna turn to a new person. And I was like, but I know I'm struggling with this, but I like who I am right now, and I want to, feel better about who I am. And it seems like you want me to wipe that away. And so I remember after she said that, I went to my room and I was crying because I was like, wow, you sound like just like dad who says this is like a phase pretty much. But then the next day when we went to our aerobics, our water aerobics, she was like, I'm sorry for what I said. If you have a guy that you like, I want you to tell me. Like if you are going to date somebody, I want to know everything about what you're feeling, what you're doing. I don't want you to feel like you can't tell me stuff. And I was like, okay, all right, mom. And we just felt better after that. Um, And around this time too, like I then came like this prompting of like, you need to start telling people. Like at one addiction recovery meeting, something told me like your days of being in the closet is gonna be going away. And I was like, no, oh my gosh, like it's the voice again. But I was like, okay, there was a good outcome from that. So the Lord's telling me that something good is gonna come out of this. So I finally like had a meeting with my family, telling them like, "Hey, it's gonna happen." My dad was like, "You don't have to tell anybody anything," and I was like, "Dad, if this means to help somebody, then I have to tell. I have to tell people." And so he's like, "All right, okay." And so I decided the first person that I felt like I needed to tell was my cousin Isis, who was practically like a another sister to me, and she was like, "Scott, oh my gosh, I wasn't sure. Every time people said that, I said, no, no, he's not. But oh my gosh." And she brought up about dating. And I was like, for the first time, I never really thought about dating, but there was something in me that felt joy and excitement. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, okay, I can do this. Yeah. And so, that brought me kind of like joy to even think about that. And then also like around this time, then COVID happened and made things, we all know about COVID. That was a crazy time. But it was a good segue because when I talked to my friend, um, Glenn, he was married to his husband and really good friends of mine since I was a youth back in high school. But he was like, "There's an organization called PFLAG," and I was like, "Oh, I've heard of PFLAG." And they've been around since like 1973. Janine Manford was the one that put this all together, and they help out with parents and individuals who are LGBTQIA plus. And so he was like, they're doing a Zoom meetings, and you can do it." And so when I went there, it was the first time with complete strangers that I said I'm gay. And it was just amazing to be able to feel open and sharing that. And also at this time, like, so even before this, like around the time where I came back from New York and I came back to Deltona, I started also I started my YouTube channel and I did Theater Guy um in my YouTube channel. And it was like I was doing movie reviews and stuff like that. But I had to stop because of grandma's situation. Um, but when I was starting to come out to people that I felt like I needed to tell them and how interesting it was that time period because I got to tell a lot of people like, hey, this is what I'm going through. And they related to my story a lot. But something was telling me like, and so it was around, yeah, for Pride Month of 2021, that's when I started feeling like I need to come out. Like, I need to publicly come out to people and tell them my story. Um, and I was like, let me use Theater Guide to do this. Because at the time, my bow tie was black. But this time I was like, I'm going to put a rainbow one. And so I kind of like did like a post. I wrote a post on June 1st. And the day before, I was like, Theater Guy, I have a teaser for you. Theater Guy is about to say an announcement. I forget how I said it, but it was me like opening the door in a dark room, and there was like this rainbow light coming out, and my head popping out. So that was definitely a wink, wink for those that knew me. They were like, "Is Scott coming out?" Like I'm sure they presumed that. And a lot of people did. And then I wrote like a post, and the first part of it said, "My dear friends, today is the start of Pride Month. For years, I have ignored this month for many reasons. I was not happy with myself. I lived in homophobia because I didn't want to accept that I was gay. Many of you know my story, many of you don't. I'm not here to talk about my long coming out tale, but I'm here to talk or start picking up the slack I have not been doing all these years." And so I'm going to skip to the last paragraph. But so for this month, I'll be posting positive things and videos to help open minds and help bring important conversations. I'm still working on a documentary, which I still am working on. But I've been talking about since, last year. And I know in time I'll be able to show that film to you all. If you ever want to know more about my story, just let me know and I can tell it to you. Well, I'll be busy during this month, but I'm sure I can talk to you soon. Oh, and have 3 hours available and a bottle of water because I'm going to be talking your ear off. I think one of the most important things is to listen to each other. And so that honestly started conversations with members from the church. Some were supportive and others were not. And I did the best that I could to kind of like stay open minded. And one of the fears that I had about coming out was not being able to support myself. in saying stuff. But because of my experience, I was like, I was able to answer these things in a open way. And it helped me to be very vulnerable, but also like have a good conversation with people. Um, and so like it was interesting to kind of bridge these two worlds. I was trying really hard to do that. And that's when I found out about Questions from the Closet podcast, which now is all out in the open. And then Listener and Love, that's how I found out about this podcast. And so it all helped me out a lot. And so then around that time in March of 2022, I saw on Facebook that DeLand Pride was having a community meeting that was open to everyone, and they're inviting people to come and talk about the events they were going to have. And for some reason, something was telling me go and do it. And so I was like, all right. And I got to meet the DeLand Pride group, and something was telling me like go and you know see what they need, and so I asked them questions and somebody was asking, "Oh, we need someone to film something." And I was like, "Oh, I'm a videographer. I can do it." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And I did a video for them that kind of introduced about DeLand Pride, and that led to so many other things. And I started being their videographer, and I filmed drag shows, events, and I really immersed myself into the community. And this time too, I also was gonna have this talk about preach my gospel, and I decided to something was telling me, share your story about why you were delayed on your mission. And so in on the pulpit, I was expecting at some point to the bishop to turn off the speaker, but he didn't. He let me share my story, and I didn't go into detail about like other aspects. It was just my story of coming out to my mom and my bishop. And there was a sister behind me who was conducting the music. Um, yeah, I mean, Genevieve Hall was like, Scott, like, Genevieve, Kelly, sorry. But Genevieve was telling her, like, and she connected the music. She was like, thank you so much for sharing that because, I have a trans grandson and I'm trying to help. I forget their pronouns and everything. I was like, oh, okay. And we started having conversations and I was having conversation with people in the ward, which I didn't expect. There was one though that ended up, I was going to talk to him and he disappeared. So I called him and he just told me like, if you if I had to follow up after your talk, I would have to say, "Well, hey, everyone, I'm straight," and blah, blah, blah. I don't think your talk had anything to do with preach my gospel. So I was like, something was telling me like, there's gonna be someone that's not gonna be aligned with what you said. And I was like, all right, this was the person. But I listened to him, and then finally I gave him my input, and I was like, you know how you feel when you need to share a testimony and you feel prompted to do something? That was this case. I could have talked about my pornography addiction, but the Holy Ghost told me not to talk about that. I could have talked about my suicidal tendencies, but I didn't feel prompted to say that. So I could have said a lot of things, but I didn't. And somehow this conversation on the phone ended up turning into like I was really opening up to him. He even asked like, how gay are you? And I'm like, what? And he's like, you have to be 50-50 because you're going to church and you're, you know, gay. And I was like, oh, I'm 100%. And finally he told me like, this is the first time I'm having a conversation with someone that's gay and at the church. And that's what I realized. I'm like, that's why you don't know much because you haven't had this conversation. So it helped out a lot to have these kind of conversations with people. And then I started to, go do advocacy in Tallahassee for Pride of the Capital, with Equality Florida. And I even went to the drag march uh, during that time. And all of this was supporting people because there's a lot of things going on in Florida. And during that time, my friends were also telling me, Scott, you need to do the Pride, pageant that we're going to be having very soon. And I was like, oh, I would love to. And somehow it worked out that I was able to do it. And so this was 2023. And for that portion of the talent, because you have to do an interview, the talent and outfit and so this is all in front of everyone at the stage, and I hadn't done anything on the stage there for 12 years, so it was nice to be back. But I decided for my talent to tell my story of when I was on my mission and how I was trying to stay closeted and hoping that the Lord would turn me straight. And it turned into a very powerful number. And at the end of that moment, like I was in my missionary outfit, I was serving in Colorado, and my friends were performing as like Coloradians like doing stuff. And then I hear the voice of the state president saying, "Hey, Elder Mena, you're done with your mission." And so I was like, "Oh no," and I had to take off my name tag. And that moment was so emotional because I was getting feelings back of like when I, was hoping to turn straight. And I was like, wait, what happened, Lord? I thought that you would, change me and you didn't. And you want me to suffer like this? And it was so quiet in the audience. And then finally I was like, no, you're not, you're perfect the way you are. And I know who I'm supposed to be. And so then I took off my tie, I took off my coat, I took off my name tag, and then I put this bow tie on. And I was theater guy, and I had my vest underneath, and I performed to "Get Up" from Mary Mary, which is a song I listened to on my mission like crazy. And my friends performed it, and then they were clacking my theater guy fan, and it was an amazing moment. And everyone just loved it. Everyone applauded. And then I ended up winning the pageant, and I was like, "What the freak? Oh my goodness, this is crazy." And after that, I like was representing DeLand Pride and going to events. And during this time, I was like worried and scared, and I was like, I'm hoping that everything will work out. And since I was part of the drag community, it was nice to be able to do so much with them and performed. And I never thought I would be performing like I did. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And definitely brought up like, well, if for instance, like Brigham Young's son, Brigham Morris Young, he was a drag queen himself too. Um, I think it was named Madame Patarini, and even performed for Lorenzo Snow's last birthday celebration back in 1886. So he was able to do that, and I was like, see, I could do that too. And so it was really nice to be able to kind of like perform. And so drag is interesting because there's like different types of drag. There's um like drag kings category, which they're like representative as more of male. And then there's drag queens who represent more female, but I'm considered a drag entertainer because I'm more of like I can it's more broad. I can do whatever type of subgenre of drag. And so there's also within that other categories of drag. It's so interesting, but I love it. But I like to tell people about drag is like it's almost like going to the movies. Like you have choices of going to a rated R movie or a rated G movie. And so you get a vast variation of drag. And mine is more of the G, PG, and sometimes PG-13 like categories. Because I want even youth to be able to see my videos and posts and performances. Um, but it's not like that case for all drag. So yeah. But it was nice to be able to do so much to help with the community. I even did like we did a pride pond for the youth, and I even invited the missionaries to come and help, and they did. And everybody was like shocked. They're like, "Why are the missionaries here?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's me. I invited them." They're like, "Oh wow." So it was really nice to be able to do so many of those events, but also I almost burnt out too. So for those of you trying to do a lot of work, do not burn yourself out. But it was nice to be able to stay active, trying to help out with the war um, and doing so much stuff. And it's been nice to see that. And a good thing out of this, like I got involved with Umbrella Brigade, which help out with the community and having food and resources that they need and even clothing and stuff like that in events. I also got to help out with the youth with their organizations, the stuff that they do. And our organization, because there was DeLand Pride, Lake Helen Pride, Daytona Pride, and then we had Deltona, and I got to help out with that chapter. So we all kind of umbrella from Volusia Pride, and we got to grow our organization, which is amazing. Um, and then also we got to actually start a PFLAG chapter in the DeLand Volusia area, which was amazing. I didn't even ever believe that I could do something like that with my friends Jim and Carol, and now we have a board and it's great. I also host like Rainbow Cinema Club every second Friday of every month where we show queer film, we discuss it, then we kind of do like a trivia and win some prizes. And then also because of the Gather conference, they created like these kind of like you can create your own like gatherings in your area. And there was a prompting in me that was telling me like something's coming up. You need to be ready for it. And when that agenda came out that that Sister Blair came up with, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I need to do. And so I started doing Volusia gatherings, and it helped out my dad a lot because like halfway through the first year, I started introducing guest speakers to come besides me because I'm like, I've shared my story enough. We need other voices to be heard so that we can have members hear it. And it slowly started growing, and my dad finally started showing up, and that was great because he started to learn from their stories. And then what was really nice was like recently we had a proclamation of love that happened um not so long ago, last 2 months ago. And I asked my dad, "Can you come help?" And even the missionaries came to help set up, and it was our Deltona Pride event that we did behind the library at the amphitheater. And so my dad really has not gone to any of my Pride performances or anything, any Pride thing. He would usually I could hear him from a distance, and I could hear that he was listening to a video that I posted on my stories, and he never physically went. So for him to finally come up and help, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is so cool." And the missionaries came to help, and they were fixing up the tents for all of the vendors that were there. And then I asked dad to come and see me perform and open the whole event. And as I was performing, he was sitting there and he stayed there for the entire event. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And because of the guest speakers from Volusia Gatherings, he got to know those people. And he's like, hey, how are you doing? They knew him because they remember him at the home here that we had it. And it was amazing. And then we had our when we had our Volusia gatherings, because we started doing it here at the house, and then we moved it to the Volusia Pride community space and doing it there, since, we wanted more people to be able to attend. I had a conversation with my dad, and my dad was like, and something told me, like, "Just tell him." And I was like, "Dad, I feel like I need to just tell you this, but I feel like at some point I am gonna start dating again. And I hope that one day, like, I feel like there's some yeah, I'm gonna get married, and I'm hoping that somehow, there'll be children that'll pop up into our relationship, with my whoever it is husband, and I feel like they'll feel safe to be in this home, and I don't know, I just feel like we'll adopt, I don't know, and somehow it will work out, but I just wanna tell you that. I don't know why, and yeah. And then my dad was like, "I think you're gonna be a great dad, and I think you're gonna do a great job." And I'm here to support you. I know you're gonna do the right thing. Um, and it's interesting because a few months ago or a few years ago before that, like I brought up about Pulse and helping out with Pulse because I was very involved with them at the time. And when I told him that, he told me that he would rather die than see me with another man. And to hear him recently just say that he supported what I was doing, I even told him, I was like, I don't know if you remember that comment, but it really affected me. And he was like, I'm so sorry. I was ignorant back then. And I've learned so much since, and I'm sorry that you felt that way, and I'm here for you, and I know you're gonna do great things, and so that really, like, I was like, "Oh," it was really great to hear that from my dad, um, but yeah, yeah, there's too much so many details in the story, and I'm sorry, around an hour, yeah, but yeah, I'm just so thankful that our Heavenly Father has really helped me out so much throughout this whole journey, and it's crazy to think, wow, 2000 yeah, 2005 when I first came out to now, over 21 years and how much has changed, but I'm just thankful for the people I've been able to connect with and see how much I've changed and I've survived too, and be where I'm at right now, so yeah. So Papa, also hit away with your questions because yeah, I'm sorry I've taken up so much time. I tried with 45. Sorry,
You
business.
didn't take up too much time. You did such a good job. And this has helped so many people just to hear a story of somebody that's been walking this road through several decades. Each story is unique, and Scott's story is super unique from any story I've heard. You think you've sort of heard it all, but then you hear new stories. Every story is unique and different. And shout out to David Doyle, who was the one that messaged me and says, you ought to get Scott Mena on the podcast. And I thought, well, of course I should. That's a no brainer. I should have reached out to him a long time ago.
Thank you, David.
And David, you are a
Glad to
good man doing great things. I don't have a lot of comments, listeners, and that's maybe partly because I just wanted Scott to have the time. Just some things I wrote down is, I thought you were great to be. I mean, this is just such a tough road you've been walking with no resources and shame.
Mm.
And I have this dream, the Les Miserables song, I have a
Oh, oh
dream
yes, good one.
that,
Yes.
everybody will just feel from the beginning of their life, straight or not straight, just that God loves them, society loves them, they can be open and honest. And Scott, for so long, was walking this road closeted with shame and self-loathing and wondering how people would respond. And I just hope for better days. And Scott kind of takes us back to where it was and what it's like today. And a lot's changed in 20 or 30 years.
Oh yeah.
But I grieve for your younger self and that your younger self walked so alone, and feelings of suicide and the things you're reading in Strength of Youth. I like that you read from that and showed how it's improved.
Hmm. And
Um,
still improving too, which has been great.
I love pornography. To me, I loved you being open about pornography use. And to me, that's more of some people would say, well, that's why Scott's gay. And my
Oh
feeling
no.
is no, pornography is a window into someone's sexual orientation. It doesn't change it.
Correct.
And it's something that Scott's worked through. And often I've learned to be more gracious and kind to people working to solve porn use because I recognize it's often a coping mechanism, it's escape, it's a way to connect. And you had nothing in your youth to connect with in a healthy way. So pornography use, yeah, is a sin. Yeah, you worked really hard to put that behind you, but I think God has a lot of grace for anybody working through porn
Yes.
use, especially closeted gay youth, just trying to find connection or understanding. And that's, yeah, at the bottom of the iceberg with porn use is often not porn use, but the need to connect, the
Oh
need to
yeah.
escape.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
you've navigated that with grace. No one's talked about Pulse on the podcast. No one has been to the Pulse Club
Oh
before that
wow, really?
terrible
Oh.
shooting in 2016. 49 people died. I remember that. It's 10 years ago, and I was just kind of starting being an ally, and I just thought how awful that is.
Yeah. And we had our 10-year
Um,
anniversary too, which is amazing. Yeah. Crazy how quick time has gone.
so I love, I just love that you're embracing all of you. Um, and everybody looks at that differently. So you're embracing your commitment to the church. You serve in church callings. You do all these different things in the church that we listeners that have grown up in the church understand. But then you're doing all these things in the community. Um, Lots of them, not just one-off things. PFLAG, Pride, drag shows. You actually do the drag shows. You perform. There's nothing again in our doctrine that says you can't do what Scott's doing. You're right. Brigham Young had a son that dressed up as a woman, if I've got those, or a grandson, or um, and performed as a woman in drag. And we look at that in olden days and go, well, that was different than now, but it's the same general idea that, people dress up and perform.
Yeah.
And we sometimes create a lot of angst around that. And I think you're good when you talk about there's PG and G and PG-13 versions of that
Oh yes.
and R-rated versions, and you're kind of navigating what's appropriate for you and your audience. Um, but my younger self might have said, Scott, don't do PFLAG, don't connect with Pulse, don't go to the gay club, don't do drag. And my older self would say, Scott, this is part of you needing a way to belong
Mhm.
and a way to find connection and a way to find value and a way to serve and a way, all the human emotions that are part of us, you are finding that in the LGBTQ community, that it's really hard to find that in church.
Yeah.
But you're nurturing that part of yourself there, and you're nurturing a part of yourself in church, and both of these parts of you are finding belonging, and you're navigating a really complicated road. I love that you invite the missionaries to be part of this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's really cool, and they want to serve, and maybe there's some closeted missionaries that are feel completely alone, and they've actually got this ward mission leader that's out and gay and in the church, and that may give them hope that they're not alone. That's I assume there's so many people that you've given hope to that they're not alone because they have proximity to a gay Latter-day Saint who's serving in the church and also serving in the community. I love this long story with your dad. Um, that's just kind of a theme that you started with, and then you really ended with that. And that tells us what's possible with proximity, with hearing people's stories. Your dad's a good man. You've never said he's not. He just had no proximity. And like me, he let other people define how he should feel about queer people. And then, like, I've seen your dad in my story. I was a YSA bishop for gay men. Well, no, that's not right. I was a YSA bishop, and there were a couple gay men in the Lord, and that changed my heart. And then I saw gay people as I think God sees them and wanted to do all I could to be an ally. And your dad's doing the same thing. So he comes to your pride events and he stays the whole time. He comes to the gathering
Yeah.
you put together that's on social media that I've enjoyed watching. And then you have this honest discussion with him and say, Dad, I may need to date again. I may feel that's my path. And, I may marry a man and we may have kids. And he just responds the way I would respond now. I'd say, I trust you, Scott. I trust you to write your story. I don't gonna make you the hero one day and the villain the next day if your story changes a little bit. I'm just gonna walk with you. You're walking a complicated road, and you've done this with grace and integrity and courage and keeping God in your life, and you'll continue to do that, and I just trust you. So I'm speaking as your dad, and I'm not your dad, but that's so when you say you may start dating again, if you do that, you're the best Scott Mena you've ever been. You're the perfect time to do that because you're emotionally, spiritually, intellectually so mature and so thoughtful and have worked through so many difficult chapters. You're the best Scott Mena you've ever been. And what a perfect time if you feel it's the right time to date. Because you're not perfect, but you're a really good time to date.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that you call yourself the theater guy. I've known you as the theater guy forever. And I love that you embrace that part of you, those God given creative talents. All of you is God given created, listeners. Everything about you, I think, is God given. And being gay is just harder to accept that, get that internalized homophobia out. But you've been super brave. This conversation with a member that was not supportive of you is a great insight into your character. You could have just not engaged, but you had the courage to call in and sort of both of you want to do the right thing. And he listening to you and sort of said questions, well, maybe you're just 50% gay and trying to sort of, everybody's got kind of a story they've made in their mind.
Yeah.
So he's got a story about gay people and you're breaking that story. And he's kind of trying to fit you in his current story by saying you're 50% gay. But like most of us, we're willing to expand our story and realize, yeah, you're 100% gay and you're 100% LDS and you're actually didn't choose this. So- and you're, and so people are, the possibility is people's stories change, but it's your courage to engage with him and to be out and navigate sometimes difficult situations. So I'll turn it back to you for final comments. But Scott, you're a hero to me. You're a hero to many others. Your younger self just probably couldn't believe where you are now, 20 plus years later, with all the good things you're doing. It's a remarkable story. And you're still a young guy. You're 30 plus years younger than me. You've got your whole life ahead of you, and you're in the
Yeah.
perfect place to do this. And your 65-year-old self, that's my age. I think I'll look back at your 35-year-old self and go, wow, everything I did to get myself to where I am right now as you're recording this podcast made the next 30 years possible. And it's going to be a great 30 years for you, Scott. So
I'm excited.
in the show notes, we'll link to all of Scott's contact information, his social media, the things he's talked about. But I'll turn it back to you for final comments, Scott.
Hmm. I'm trying to think of any aspect of the story that I probably forgot, but I actually did end up with Michael. I actually did end up talking to him and actually opening up to how I felt about him. Actually, that he was
Cool.
incarcerated in Daytona Beach, and but I've told him I was like, "This is what I felt," and but that was the time actually where I was like, "Hey, it was this and that," and he was like, "I still want to be friends, you know. I'm not gay or anything." And I was like, "We're not going to talk about that," but yeah, but it was a good way for me to kind of end that chapter because um, I needed to close that because I knew from that experience, it taught me like number one, in any relationship, you need to be open with who you are, and if you're not, then you're constantly going to be in this cycle of like hurting yourself for something that isn't real. And it taught me so much as things like this is not what I want in a relationship. I want to have joy and openness and all of that. Um, so it's been that was a really good thing that I learned. I mean, at a time I thought that, oh my gosh, that was a waste of time that I was with him, but instead it was like a learning experience for me. I thought what a true relationship should not be, but you can do better,
That's great.
and it happens to all people. So we have a lot of stories like that. But yeah. And besides that, I'm like, I don't know what else. Oh gosh, there's so many little in between things, but I'm like, that could be for another podcast for another time. But yeah, but no, I'm just thankful to be able to share all of this with you and for everyone listening and watching. It's really, really exciting to be able to share this. So yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Scott, for reaching out. Scott, before we recorded, said, I did never quite reach out to you to do a podcast. I thought you were busy. And I think David Doyle was kind of the one that said, I reached out to you. But the point I'm trying to make is I'm not too busy for your podcast listeners. If you feel it's time as a queer Latter-day Saint or an ally to come and share your story, this is what I sort of feel purpose in doing. And I'm s- going through a retirement phase where I'm selling my business and just able to do this more as I move into retirement. So please reach out. You can find me on social media if you feel it's your turn to share your story. And some stories are not done yet. Scott's kind of at a point where it's real clarity. He's worked through so many chapters of his story. And yeah, your story isn't done, but some may feel, gosh, I'm just sort of in the middle of my story. I'm not sure I'm ready to share it. But you might actually be a good time to share it because you may have accomplished more than you realize. But anyway, this is Richard Ostler and Scott Mena signing off on another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.